and welcome back to the CODESHO podcast, everybody.
Hey, what's going on?
Today we've got Simon on, and one thing I want to say about Simon is if it weren't for all the nice lies that he said about me, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. So I owe a lot to this guy. We worked together at the last job. People are probably getting tired of hearing about Flink, but he worked at Flink too, and kind of helped kickstart me there as a web developer, which we can talk about how that turned into what it is now. But Simon is a UI UX designer as well as a phenomenal web developer, probably one of the top five.
Like a CSS wizard, right?
CSS freaking wizard.
I don't even understand CSS.
Yeah, it's not even,
Understandable.
Beyond,
not meant to be understood.
Yeah, beyond comprehension. Anyway, so I guess we could just start by talking a little bit about, I guess, like what we did with Sean, like I said before, is he just kind of walked us through from the very beginning. What was your first dev job, and how did that translate at least to where you and I met? Let's get to there first.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Like, where did you start? Like, what made you want to be a developer? Where did that whole idea start?
Gotcha. So, yeah, growing up, I had a few friends that were developers. They were significantly older than I was. But being surrounded by them and just hearing a lot of the dev talk, that they're talking between themselves with is...
It sounds like a different language.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I'm a really curious guy, so I'm like asking a lot of questions, and it's like, oh, okay, that's how that works, and that's how this website was built and all this stuff. But eventually it was like I was really into video games, right? And I still am today. But I asked a friend of mine like how I could start my own website, and he pointed me to WordPress, and I picked out like this really shitty theme.
How old were you?
I was like 14 at the time.
Okay.
So like really young, yeah.
Cool.
And
I was making GeoCities when I was 14.
Well,
it's a different
like
yeah.
WordPress from the 90s.
Yeah.
So I started with that, and then I'd always been into Photoshop and trying to design like signatures in forums back when that was a thing.
Okay.
And like wallpapers and stuff, just stupid graphics. So
were those HTML? I know what you're talking about. The signatures, is that like HTML?
No. At least the ones that I was working with were just
images,
like, just JPEGs and stuff.
Okay, gotcha.
But there was a forum where you could post a signature, and then the person after you would have to review yours and then post theirs, and so it would create this like feedback loop.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
And so that was really cool because then you'd say like, dude, how the hell did you do this? Like, this effect, and then he would show you or send you some links or something.
Are you talking about like signatures, like digital signatures?
No. So like in a forum,
what's a signature?
Like you would make a post in a thread, right?
Okay, yeah.
And then under each of those posts, like usually you have a profile photo, but you could have a signature under each of your posts.
Oh, okay.
And then it would say like, these are the games
like
I play.
Okay, I kind of remember that. Yeah.
It's like your favorite game character.
Like, Matt, the programming god, or whatever.
You
can put whatever you want in
yeah.
there.
I mean, everyone just knows that. So
I didn't even know how they made them. I've never been super involved in forums.
Cool.
But
either was I. Yeah. Go. Okay. Sorry. Keep going.
No, you're good. So that was really how I got started. Just like making my own blog and then making minor CSS tweaks to that.
And you didn't take any classes either. Like you got. That's awesome, actually. You literally, because this is kind of the advice that we give people if you don't want to pay for school. Like, and we could talk about your experience in school, but you just started doing it, posted it online, and got feedback from people, and then additionally you gave feedback to other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. And free.
And you tried your hand at school at one point, right? Or maybe I'm premature.
Yeah.
Maybe
so that's a little later. Actually, that I guess is the next thing, because between that and when I was like 18, 19, I didn't really do much. It was a lot of fiddling around. Like I remember I would play World of Warcraft, and the interface is written in a language called Lua.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so like you'd mess around with macros and trying to come up with like plugins and stuff, but it was never anything super complicated. So just little things like that. But then when I was 19, I was going to community college for graphic design, but I hated it because it was like all they would teach you was how to use the programs. It was like, okay, here's Photoshop, and today we're going to learn about saturation, brightness, and contrast. And it's like, wow, okay. I feel like as somebody that's trying to get into the career of design, if you haven't figured that out by the time you get into college, like you probably need to like pick up the pace.
College, though, for like the people making the curriculum is kind of a slippery slope, because if you don't make it so basic enough, people are going to complain that like, oh, I want to get into graphic design, but I don't know. Like, because programming was the same way. It's funny you mentioned that, though, because I took one graphic design course. Was yours at CSN?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I had to take, like, the basic entry-level graphic design course, and I just remember, like, okay, I was like, I'm not into graphic design, but it would be super cool to walk away from this class after a semester and be like, I have an idea of how that works. Absolutely not. They're like, this is how you make a file in Photoshop, or
Yeah.
not even Photoshop, I think it was Illustrator. And then, like, this is how you make a circle. This is how you change the aspect ratio of it. And you're just like, okay, I know literally nothing about graphic design still. And, like, all that's way past me now. If I opened
the
Illustrator.
danger is, so I agree with you and I disagree with you. The danger
Ooh.
is, yeah, I know.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Well, I guess yeah. It's two competing things. We want to learn something, so that's definitely true. You don't want to go too slow. So it's like, hey, like you should. Here's this. This is always the thing. You should be reading the book. There's a book on Photoshop. Read that, and then we're going to discuss like the higher level concepts. But I like.
You know I'm always going to debate you on that.
Yeah.
That's like one learning style, though.
That's fair. But yeah.
I guess that's what you signed up for in college.
But yeah, because the problem is, like in my school, I didn't know how to program. I had played around with web pages, like just HTML.
Mm-hmm.
It was way even before JavaScript came out, and then, well, I don't know if it was out, but I didn't play around with it. And then I just stopped programming for a while. But then when I decided to go back to school, I didn't know programming, and so we learned from like Hello World.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so I guess that's a good thing. And in my school, it was fast paced. We did read the book, or I read the book. I don't know if it was actually required for everybody. So that's why like it's hard. Like I'm okay if there's like a beginner course, but I agree with you. Like maybe that learning style works for me, but like.
It is what you
Well,
signed up for, though, and the frustrating thing is the professor says this is how you're going to achieve success, and if you just blatantly ignore that, then, like, you're setting yourself up for failure. But it just sucks because, like, that's the basis of all college study is read the book, come to class, we'll talk about what you read, and it's just like that does not work for a lot of people.
Well, and it's like, sorry to interrupt, but it's like in your example of Hello World, right? In the real world, what you're doing is you're explaining to somebody how you can use a programming language to get text on a screen.
Yeah.
Like the problem to solve is we want to just display something, right? And if you approach it from that angle, it's like that's great because now they have some kind of concept of how data flows, right? Mm-hmm. Like into something visual. Yeah. But if you go up to somebody and you say, "Hey, here's this Hello World exercise, and these are the steps that you need to do to get Hello World on the screen," there's no easy way for them to extrapolate those steps into a larger vision of how to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the approach that I've always taken with things is you have to solve a problem. It's like you have to build a box. And it's like, okay, if you don't know anything about hammers or wood, you're just going to like take a rock and just like mash a bunch of wood together or something. You'll figure out a way to do it. And then maybe you'll figure out like, oh, maybe there's a better way to like put a nail in wood or whatever it is.
We
right?
talked about this like on the last episode or maybe two episodes ago, I think. Remember we were talking about like the nail gun and the hammer.
Oh yeah. So actually in that case, I do absolutely agree with you, and I do even agree with what you're saying. I think the better way, if you were gonna use like if a school is gonna use my way of doing it, I think actually the more important thing is lab. Like
for sure.
And at DigiPen we did have like here's Hello World, whatever. Then the next steps up, but then we had game class, and game class was build a game. What game? You decide. Mm-hmm. And then we would say, everyone would always say like RPG, and we say no. Yeah, that's too complicated. But like you're building more than Hello World, and so I do agree with that. Right. You are solving problems. We show you the tools, and it is just a tool. Now go solve a problem.
Well, so to your point, is that an argument against books?
No. Okay. My argument is against the teaching style that I experienced going to design school, because I would go into a class and he would say, okay, class, we're going to open up this image. Everybody would open the exact same image. They'd say, go to image, go to open to image settings, and then change these values to these numbers. And I specifically remember one of my classmates who sat next to me, he turned to me and he asked, crap, I forgot what the numbers were. Can you help me? And I was trying to explain to him, it's not about the specific numbers. It's like you're never
Yeah.
going to use the same numbers
Yeah, yeah.
across
Oh,
multiple
yeah,
images.
yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
he's just trying to tell you can make the image look better by increasing the contrast and reducing the saturation. And it's just that concept that you're supposed to be teaching.
Yeah, yeah.
But all he would teach was, no, move this slider to this value.
Yeah.
And that
that's
doesn't...
not good.
Right. And so that was like a year and a half of my life is just going to these design classes where I didn't learn anything other than how the tool works.
Yeah.
When I really wanted to be exposed to the industry and how you actually design something in a process.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I did not like school for that reason. I'm sure if I went to a much better school where they had labs and stuff, that would have been better. But yeah, I guess to move on from that, I got an internship through a friend of mine.
So did you dropped out of school?
Well, at first I got an internship.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry. Okay, you're still going. My mistake.
Yeah, I was determined to at least get the degree. I was like,
Okay.
I don't care. I'll just go to these classes and finish. But then I got an internship as a designer at a company here in Vegas. And I was working on like random things because I don't think the company really knew how to use a designer. They never really worked with one before.
Yeah.
So they were like, we just need like a button. Can you just design me a button? And it's like, okay, here's a button.
You want rounded corners on that?
Yeah,
Got it.
like, you know, whatever you need, man. So,
I think the button's already been designed.
well, it's
Sorry,
like,
go.
these are like hardcore programmers that like don't know anything.
That's fair.
Everything
Okay,
could be like black and white
Yeah,
for all they
yeah,
care.
yeah.
But then I was given a project to work on a mobile app, like from scratch. And I was so excited. And the mobile app was this idea of you could take a picture and then go through a process of turning it into a postcard where it had like a frame around the picture. And then on the other side, you could type a message. And then it would like physically send
cool.
out a postcard.
What year was this?
2011.
Okay, I was gonna say this must have been like in the very early days of
Oh, yeah.
iPhone.
Yeah.
Cool.
Super early. I mean, before the iPhone 4, because I remember the iPhone 4 came out after that.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't have any experience designing mobile apps or really anything. And so my approach was like, okay, I'm just going to mind map all the actions that a user needs to be able to take to get from point A to point B. And so I took this huge whiteboard out of our meeting room and put it in my office and drew all over it. And then that was like my inventory list to what I needed to design, what actions needed to happen in what order.
Yeah.
And then I made a design and the owner and the client really loved it and everything was super awesome. And after that I realized like
And how? Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you again. How old were you at this point?
19.
Okay, so I just want to just to recap. You've been doing some amount of programming, and because you're just an intern, and you're about to say that like they loved it. It's, like, I think I
Yeah.
interrupted slightly too early, but the fact is you've now been doing this for 5 years.
Oh, I mean, on and off, yes.
That's fair,
Yeah.
but like it's not like you just got an internship out of college and they were like, oh, you're a genius.
Oh,
You've
yeah.
been-
No,
you've been
that's
doing it,
correct.
yeah.
I did have experience. I built my first computer when I was 13 after my bar mitzvah. And the first program I installed was Photoshop.
Oh, wow.
So I had like lots of experience.
Okay.
Like just using the tools.
I just want to say, I remember back in like those days, I remember like Photoshop just seemed like magic. Like if you knew it, like you had a superpower. Like I remember
Yeah.
thinking like it was like this mystical world and it'd be so cool to get in on that. But like my uncle could do Photoshop and like he could do the craziest stuff. Like my dad, he's a pilot. He had a picture with, it was just like, it was another pilot buddy of his, but they were like outside of the airplane and my dad just has his like arm around him. And my uncle Photoshops Kanye West's face on this guy. And it was just like mind-boggling. I was like, if you know that, like you've got something going on. Like you are it if you could do that.
When I was 14, I didn't know about Photoshop or anything. I guess I had no inclination for design. So I was always trying to read about like hacking. And I never learned actually anything about hacking. But the thing that I did was back in the early days, I don't think you can do this anymore. But you could download basically like an email spammer. And so you could like, so I could, if I didn't like you, I could put in your email and then I could put in a fake email. So like this was even before Gmail, but I could put in like at like Butthead, like Matt@butthead.com or Simon@butthead.com. And then I could put a message and then specify like send this 5,000 times.
Oh my God.
And then you just would run it. And I was just thinking like, I don't think you could even. They would just trace it right away.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like anyway, that's what I was doing, not Photoshop.
Hacker. Anyway, sorry, didn't
Well,
mean to derail.
that's just another skill set, right?
That's just another
It's like,
skill set. Yeah.
Yeah, there's only so much time in the day.
Yeah.
But
no,
yeah.
go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
no. So let's see, where was I?
Whiteboard. You brought.
Oh.
Yeah, they came into the office.
Bar mitzvah, download Photoshop.
Yes. So I mean, I didn't go in there with no experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it had been incremental for a long period of time.
Yeah.
The growth. But that was like the real turning point for me, because it was like, wow, okay. This stuff, like this process of creating flows and then coming up with a way to turn that into a design, I never learned at school. Nobody ever told me about it. And it was like, okay, I obviously need to keep going in this direction. And that's what motivated me to drop out of school. Because I was like, I'm wasting, like, because I'd have to leave during the day. I mean, it was like 4 hours out of my day at work was spent at school 3 days a week.
Were you close to finishing?
I messed up my, what is it called? Like the order of classes you take. And so it would have been a year, an additional year of work.
Jeez.
And
So
was
I
this
was
for
like-
an associate's?
Correct. Yeah.
I gotcha. Okay.
And I was just like, well, an associate's isn't even that much. I'm not like, my goal was like, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
No, I get it.
Totally do not mean that as an insult to associates.
No,
I just
it's
mean in
not.
the context of like getting experience. I was thinking if I get 2 years of experience doing what I was doing,
Oh
then,
yeah.
that's
The
probably
work experience is more valuable than the
right. So I was like, well, it feels wrong to take away half of my hours every week, and when I could be doing this more.
It's actually funny because I actually agree. There's a guy that we work with, and at one point we were talking about resumes, and he also has an associate's degree, and he was just saying like, dude, I want to get my content in one page, and I have to prioritize what's important, and my associate's degree is just not that important. Like the experience is way more important than the degree, especially if it's not a bachelor's. Like maybe if you got a bachelor's, but an associate's just kind of like, okay, well you kind of like. You learn something about programming, but I would never take one seriously if I was interviewing, because I know what I learned from that, and it was like nothing. Like I walked away from that like, okay, it's cool that I get to put this on a resume, but I really don't, because it was like you said, and plus it's all like it's kind of all theoretical, hypothetical, whatever. You spend a lot of time learning about computer science, which in hindsight is good. I'm glad about that. But it was more about like you're reading a book about how to write code, but you're not writing it yourself, and you're not being introduced to the problems. Like it's one thing to say, hey, Simon, you might want to program this thing this way because if you don't, you'll hit this problem. But if I just explain it to you, it's not the same as actually doing it and encountering that problem. And I feel like the semesters were so compressed that they were just like, we're not going to let you mess this up because that would waste a week. That would waste 2 weeks. Like we just need to get straight to the point. And so you never really walk away from it with any like real knowledge. Like,
you know that there's tools, but you don't know how to use them.
Yeah.
I really like, because you knew about like MySQL. You said you had that book.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like that's not the same as building a website and building like your models and building all your query. And, like,
I mean, they say like a senior developer really, it's not that he knows everything that's right. It's that he knows all the ways that are wrong, and like he can kind of guide a junior dev in the right direction when he's making those mistakes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just felt like I walked away from that, and I didn't really know the wrong way to do things. I knew the theoretical right way to do a few things, but also none of the stuff that we did was like a real world application. By the time we left, there was no actual software with like a user interface. It was all like terminal stuff, command line stuff, and I just never felt like, I was like, what am I ever going to use this for? Like, this looks like a movie. Like, I'm not going to actually write, like, nobody can use this software. Like, you know, you want to go home and show your mom or your sister or your spouse or your whatever, like, look at what I wrote, but you show them that. And they're
check
like,
it. Yeah. I wrote, the coolest thing that I wrote early on was, and this was an assignment. It was, you take a file and you could split it up into X number of chunks, and then you could also recombine it.
Okay.
Which was cool, and it could be useful, except for there's better versions of that out there.
Yeah.
But like, still, I was like, look what I did, and my parents.
Well,
didn't
what we
care.
talked about early in the podcast, for me, if you want somebody to learn, you have to focus on things that they're interested in. Like, get them engaged, get them excited about it. Because if you're not excited about it, you're not retaining that stuff the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like Patrick, you know, he's now doing iOS development, and I can tell that he is just absorbing so much information because he's found what he wants to do. He's super excited with it. with like he was doing QA before, and he's good at it, but like you could just tell that the passion for that is not the same. The passion for the engineering
He likes
side
to
is
build.
better.
He likes to build.
And I mean, that guy, since he came on the podcast, when he last came on, it was the weekend before he started working on iOS. And like, seriously, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, it is amazing what he's learned. Like, the guy is literally re-architecting the MVP design pattern, like all of our view controllers that are in the MVP pattern over to MVVM, and the guy's nailed it. Like, he's got it down. And that's pretty
sick.
significant thing for a brand new
there's
developer.
there's a lot of things that could go wrong. There's like a lot of moving parts.
And like I do the code review. The first couple were like I just kind of had to guide him, but that's expected. Like and some of it wasn't even that he was doing it wrong. It's just like our company's going to do this a little bit differently than this or whatever.
Right.
But once he started picking up on that stuff, I'm running it and I'm like trying to find a bug. I'm trying to find a warning or some red flag or something, and there's just nothing. It's
Cool.
just
That's
like he's
awesome.
doing really, really good. My biggest thing would just be, and I just think this is funny because everybody deals with it, the naming. He's not there yet with the naming, but we'll get there.
That always takes a long time.
It does. And I'm still not, like, sometimes I name things and I'll look at Matt and I'll be like, I just named this the Object Service App Payment Provider, blah, blah, blah. Is that a good name? Yeah, Matt and I are the same. Yeah, it seems fine. It gets to the point. Anyways, but yeah, that's my thing that I'm always trying to focus on is like, let's get people learning things that they're excited about. Find a way to get them engaged because if they're not, they're going to drop out. They're going to, like, I got through, but I got through just because my dad said I'm kicking you out of the house if you don't finish. So, like, the moment,
Yeah,
So.
I mean, in programming, it's weird because when I was young, I would talk to my friends about it and they'd be like, dude, I'm not going to be a programmer because I don't want to sit there and look for a missing semicolon for 2 hours. You know, and it's like that's totally fair, but it's a difference of perspective, right? Because you're not going to find somebody that's motivated to sit there and read through code and find a missing punctuation or something. But what's fun is getting to that end result where you built something. That's where the motivation is. It's like Patrick, I'm sure, feels really motivated when he builds a page or a feature and he can click through it and see the full process take place. And he's like, I did that.
I think what's even cooler is when you get past that 90% to the 100%. Because like when you're doing what he's doing, you always do the 90% of the project, but you never get the final result. And it's so satisfying finally getting to the end of a feature and being like, this is finished, this is polished, and this works really well. And I can walk away from that feeling really good that I finished what I started. I mean, I know we all feel the same way about that button we built, but it was just like walking away from that and knowing this thing is solid.
Still talk about that button.
Yeah, that thing is fantastic.
But one of the difficult things, I agree with all that, but even Patrick, he did go to school. Was it a 4-year, 2-year, or 4-year degree?
He did 2-year.
He did 2-year. Plus, he's been working as QA, so he's been introduced to code for a long time. And he's been building his own side projects. The hard thing is, let's say you take somebody who says, I'm motivated to learn. Maybe my brother says, I'm motivated to learn. I don't know what you can do first that isn't a little bit boring, because you're not building stuff. You're building Hello World. Day one, you're learning about IDE, right? Like what you're learning about the tools to help you build the tools. And so that's the challenging thing. What can you do without for loops?
Right.
So that's just the challenge, right?
But it's the payoff that makes that cost worth it.
Yeah.
Like,
so
I'll happily read through documentation or textbook or something, and it's boring, but I know that that's just like the hump that you have to get over before you can start building. And
It's like the cliche that we talk about all the time. It's about the journey, and you oftentimes miss the forest for the trees when you're going through this process. And then when you get there, you're like, all of those really frustrating moments were super profound. That time that I was sitting there for 3 hours and I was smacking my head against the wall. Even when I figured it out, I was still mad that it took that long. But I will never do that again. And you forget that, again, that is really what it means, I think, to be like a senior developer. Is I know all the ways to do these things wrong. And if you if you live in this fantasy world where you're going to do everything right the first time, that really isn't. That's not what you want, believe it or not. In the moment, you can't see that, but that's not what you want.
I had a buddy in school who I never thought I was super smart. I'm willing to just bang my head against the wall forever, right? So I think I'm a hard worker. I had a buddy at school, and he's the guy who has worked at Apple, Amazon, Google. It's funny.
AMD, right?
And AMD. He works at Google now. But he said, man, there's all these other people at school who are like smarter than me. And he had a roommate he was like, he doesn't even study. He just gets it. And I said, yeah, don't worry about that. Like, work hard, study. because at some point that guy might run into an issue that he doesn't know how to solve, and he's not prepared. Now it's going to be super hard. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. But what I said was, you're preparing yourself to handle these situations that you don't know. And then, like I said, right out of school, that guy worked for Apple. Now he's worked for, and then he worked for Amazon, then AMD, now Google.
I also think you just have to find comfort in discomfort.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest thing. Like,
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, and another point to that, and it's like a repeating theme here, even for myself, is you have to surround yourself with really good people.
Yeah.
Like, I was really lucky to have friends who were programmers growing up, and I could just listen in and ask questions. I mean, a lot of people don't have that kind of resource. And it's like Patrick, right? He's been working with us for years, and it's like, you know, not to toot our own horns, but it's like we're pretty good developers, and
watching that
can
growth
learn.
for us has been equally satisfying.
cool.
Right.
Sure,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
really cool.
yeah, it's
Y'all keep talking real quick. I'm gonna do this super unprofessional thing. I don't have a charger, so I'm gonna go grab a charger. But y'all keep going. Cool.
okay.
Okay. So at this point, so you're still at the point where you're in, you're doing your internship. They like you. You decided to quit school. Have you done any programming yet?
No. So this is where I was introduced to programming. Like, besides like WordPress. Yeah, you're fine. Besides like super simple WordPress stuff where I couldn't even edit like HTML because I didn't know what that was at the time.
WordPress is mostly PHP, right?
Yeah, but I wasn't writing any code. It was really just using the CMS to build out pages and content and stuff. But it was like, you know, you start to understand the behaviors of how things lay out on a page and how back-end web applications work and stuff. But when I started this job here, my first job, that's where I was exposed to a bunch of developers. And this was a small shop where it was like an agency.
I swallowed wrong. Sorry. Go ahead.
It was a small agency, and so everybody wore different hats. And I remember one time, you know, we would get requests from these small clients, and it'd be like, hey, we really want to swap out our logo on the website. And it's like, all the other developers are busy. I'll just do it. Can't be that hard. So it's like, you log into the server, like, what the heck is FTP and what's SSH and all this stuff. And then you figure out, like, you know, you just take it one thing at a time until you get it done. And it's just like you repeat that process over and over and over. I remember I was so confused why in CSS, like, you have to use, you like call a class name or a selector, and then you use open bracket and close bracket to put the properties in there, right? And it makes sense now looking back. But at the time I was like, I can't understand why they put the brackets. Like, it doesn't make sense. And I remember asking one of my coworkers, like, can you explain this? And he couldn't even explain it because he doesn't even understand, like, why I would ask a question that, you know? And it's just little things like that. And it's like, eventually you're like, okay, I get it. It's just part of the process. But I really credit a lot of that to just being, like I said, surrounded by good people. It's like, I can always go ask this guy a question and he'll help me out.
Yeah.
That means a lot. And it was just that process repeated over and over and over, and it's still repeated today over and over and over again.
You're in an interesting world, though, because you do design, and like at our current job, you're kind of the only technical designer.
Right.
How does that work? Like, because with programming, we get to like kind of bounce stuff off each other. At least with the UI stuff, everybody has an opinion. That doesn't mean that it's right, though.
Yeah.
How does that work? Like, how do you find the inspiration? How do you get feedback that you deem valuable? Like, my feedback's probably not valuable the same way that somebody of your design calibers would be.
That's an interesting question. So the way I would define it is there's a clear separation between the data that's going to be displayed on a page, or the data that's available, and how you lay it out on the page. Because generally the process is something like this, okay? You have a set of data. It's like you have users, or a user, and it has an object with like email and name and all that kind of stuff. And then what's underneath it. And it's like, okay, you have orders and you have subscriptions or whatever else is in there. But looking at the data, you need to create a hierarchy of what's most important down to what's least important. And the least important stuff usually you leave out unless it's like it's like terms of service or something, where it's like, yeah, the user it's not required for them to see it for the application, but it's valuable and we need to display it. Something like that. Right. But once you have that hierarchy, it actually becomes really easy because then all you're doing is trying to group elements together using design principles and then using like typography and color theory to create contrast. So you can visually create that hierarchy where it's like, okay, our navigation needs to be very prominent about what page they're on, right? And that's not a technical problem to solve. It's just a contrast issue.
Okay.
Right? It's like I need to make it clear to the user that this menu item is selected. Okay. It's just a matter of creating contrast. And how you do that is in a zillion different ways. Maybe you make it bigger, maybe you make it bolder, maybe you make it lighter. Like if everything else is really heavy, you just need it. It's just about creating contrast.
It really is like a different. It's fascinating to me. It's because I don't think like this because I haven't needed to. It's like, here's the side menu. You clicked that one. That's the one that you're on. That's programmer like wireframe or whatever. It's like that's the one that you're on. Well, which one am I on? The one that you clicked on. You don't know. It's obvious, but it's not obvious. So it's like that's why we need people who think differently, who know these different pieces.
Well, and we've been like super spoiled to work with somebody like you because you understand the technical side of it as well. And we've worked with a designer that didn't understand the technical side of things, and it was absolutely miserable. It was so hard because he would have this design that he'd create in like Adobe XD or Sketch or whatever, it doesn't matter. And he'd give us the source files, like maybe like a background image or something, but it would be positioned just perfectly, like
for that particular
page, like because for example, like you're talking about like contrast, so like the text would sit on top of like, you know, if there's like a guy holding a basketball, like the words will be on the basketball, and you're just like, okay, well that's insanely unrealistic because we've got so many different device sizes that can go horizontal, vertical, iPad, what, like how do you want to achieve this? And the guy would just be like, well, okay, so he has no idea what he's talking about, but he's like, we'll create this API that can serve up assets, and it will tell you exactly where you want the image position to be on all devices. And you're just like, that is so ridiculous. Like, that's not realistic. Like, nobody does that, and I don't think you understand the technical, the technical part of that, because every year, maybe like Apple adds a safe area, Apple adds a this, that changes things, a new device size, and like, are we going to constantly be expected to go back through the database and update the position? It was like, it was so crazy. So when we work with you, obviously, if you were to do something like that, we could bring it up. But really, that just never happens. Like you don't have unrealistic expectations of what the technology can do, and that's super cool, and that's a testament to your understanding of the programming side. But like, it is just hard for me to understand how you could be really next level or be really elite at design if you don't understand the technological side. Because you're just going to have a lot of like headbutting.
What do you think about that? Yeah,
I mean, I fully agree. Like, I feel like, you know, if you're in print design, okay, you need to understand like the different types of shirts and the different type of screen printing, and you need to understand like how the process is done. It's very especially when you're dealing with physical goods, there's a lot of different options and like factors that go into something.
This is thicker cardstock. This is more glossy or whatever. This is, I don't know, like the T-shirt, like depending on the type of cotton or polyester or blah blah blah.
Right, and like, you know, what are the effects of like if you print a label on something and then you wash it 20 times, or if you iron it, or and there, like in that sense, there's use cases that you need to understand, and there's manufacturing processes that you also have to understand to really leverage the design. Like you can come up with a cool T-shirt design, right? Like the graphic, but to actually put it on a T-shirt is a whole other level. And I think it's the same thing with technology. It's like it's better always to understand how your design is going to be used in the real world. Yeah. And in the tech, that means being developed.
I just wish that they had at least, like, I don't expect you to be an expert programmer, but have an entry-level understanding of how data is served to an application. Like, if you don't understand that, we're going to be having a lot of problems. Like, if you don't, like, it's hard because people have this, like, abstract idea of what programming is. Like, they really don't understand what's involved. And I try to tell people, like, it is so stupid. Believe me, this is stupid. There's nothing that this application is going to give you out of the box. Nothing. Unless Apple gives you some convenient little SDK or something to build this little element. But like in general, to get data on the screen, or to get a position of an image, or to get an image on the screen, all of that data has to come from somewhere. Yeah. So I just wish there was a way that you could say, like, to the designer, like, when you put something on this page, I need every piece of data like on the side. Like we got to map this out. Like if you don't understand the data serving it, then this is going to be a pointless conversation. So I don't know how you can teach designers that, but in one way or another, like that would be super cool if in college or if in a design boot camp or whatever, they would just say, we're going to give like 2 weeks and we're going to introduce how do APIs work. Like what, not on a technological level, but just how does serving data to an application work, web and app or whatever.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand that, we're just going to have problems.
Well, the closest thing, there was one class that I took in college that helped a lot, and it was my typography class.
Okay.
I remember
Helped Steve Jobs too.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
You're basically him.
No, it's just it was in the book. He says like he took a typography class at like Reed College or whatever, and that was the thing that took Mac that stopped having just like the monospaced fonts.
Oh.
And that's what everybody liked, and it was just because he happened to take like a calligraphy or like typography class, and so like there was no computers at the time. Everything there's so many things. It was just like terminal.
As an engineer, I hate non-monospaced font. Ugh. Ugh. Especially in an IDE.
But that's different though, because that is different because we line stuff up. That isn't for like that is meant for design for a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Well, and like typefaces are they have very different use cases. Like programming typefaces are way different than what you'd see in a book.
Yeah.
Like reading a book there's a whole science behind
but
that.
But even in like a design for a mobile app, if you have monospaced font, you're like, okay, well this could fit 60 characters versus who knows? It's whatever amount. It depends on what letters are in there.
Totally fair.
Like lining up text in an app is awful for the designer and the engineer, I feel like.
Yes.
Ugh.
That's always been an issue.
Especially when you don't have the wrap content stuff that Android has.
Oh yeah.
Anyways,
you got the ellipses.
That's for another. No, it's just there's ways to do it, but in iOS, like wrapping the content of an element,
like having it grow with the size.
Having it grow with the size is like not trivial always.
It's not as easy on Android. You literally just say, I want this thing to wrap its content.
Yeah.
So it will grow.
Oh, I see what you're
There's
saying.
the idea of intrinsic size in iOS, but we could chase that. I mean, that's like a deep conversation. It's just really frustrating. Like when you build like custom element or like custom views or whatever, like we'll talk about it later. Because I'm just thinking like that could go forever. But yeah, it's difficult. It's just tough sometimes to get, especially if you have like two text fields that are both dynamically sized. Forget about it. Anyways.
Interesting.
Sorry.
But anyway, so back to like the typography point. Like when I took that class, one thing that we learned about was like how you lay out text on a page. So like a newspaper, right? It's like they are working within very confined constraints about where an image is going to go and where the text is going to go and how many columns it's going to be and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's just purely a data problem. It's like the content is always going to be written before the typographist gets access to to actually lay it out because it's required. It's like
in a newspaper.
Yeah. And even changing like one word, like there are things called orphans, right? So like if you have a paragraph and you have one word that's on the last line, it's called an orphan. And you're not supposed to do things like that because it's like you're causing the user's eye to go all the way to the other side just for one word.
Okay.
So there are things you can do to fix that, but that's the consequence of editing text on like a printed page or something is you're going to have those. Now, the challenge, just quick on that note, the challenge on orphans in technology is that the screen sizes vary so much. You can't always guarantee that that's going to wrap at that one point. To your point, like it's really hard to work with text spacing and stuff on text.
Yeah, at least with a newspaper, it's like a fixed size.
Right. They have very fixed constraints. Like it's a lot harder because of that, but it's also a lot easier in other ways. But yeah, I like that's a problem where it's almost always approached from a design angle, or from a data angle. I'm sorry, not like graphic design where it's like, well, you just go crazy on whatever colors and layouts you want. And so that class helped me a lot to understand that perspective. And now it's like whenever I work on a feature and I know that, especially if it's coming from a third-party service, I'll just ask for the API documentation. It's like, just tell me.
You're a unicorn. It just does not happen in the design world. These people have ridiculous. Like dribble,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
my god, you just
Hilarious.
yeah, laughable what some of these people do.
Yeah.
Like this works perfectly in this aspect ratio at this side. You can't scale that at all. Don't worry about it. Whatever. Dribble is crazy. Anyways.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, once I have the data and I know exactly what's available, I can just.
What about when you don't have the data? Because that's a challenge sometimes where they don't give you anything.
That's the scariest times. Like, I was just asked to do that actually, where start from scratch, don't reference anything from before, and let's go for our dream.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know you're going to get pushback. Like, you know that you're going to put something in there that can't be done.
Yeah. And it's hard because it's like, as cool as this feature could be, if I go all the way, I mean, you're talking like 2 years for one feature. Do you know what I mean? Like that's why I really love working within timelines and working closely with the developers, because I can say, okay, I can ensure that the design is going to fit within the scope of what we're talking about, timeline and work, like level of effort wise. Mm-hmm. Instead of just like throwing you guys to the wind and saying, hope you guys can do this in the given amount of time. And it's not even the product owner's position to say whether you guys can get it done in time. And it's like, but they're the ones that are going to be approving the design. And it's just like, I'd really like to avoid that disconnect at all costs.
Yeah, yeah. With the original version of our app, I think I spent like 80 hours on one like animation combination for like a pull down. Yeah. And it still wasn't.
Not the original. You mean?
Oh yeah. Not the original. The
redesign with the unreasonable designer.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So the one that never actually went live. Like nobody saw it. But yeah, like.
And the scary part about that is not only did you spend 80 hours, but total for both platforms, there was probably close to 200 hours spent. Like
just that one feature.
On that one, on just engineering to try to get that on iOS and Android. Between both. Yeah, that was just ridiculous.
Because it was a cool design, like a dribble-ish design. Yeah. But like
not even ish, like dribble and beyond.
It was, but like I achieved it like pretty close, but even still I think I went one more time. I think I'd spent like 80 hours and I was saying like is this what you have in mind? And he's like, it's close, but
and we never even got to a place where we tested it. Not really, not seriously.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing that I think kills a lot of designers is like, I don't think you should ever aim for your end goal when you're designing. I think it should always be iterative.
Yeah.
And the same thing is in development. It's
of course. Yeah.
You know, we shouldn't invest hundreds of hours. I mean, we can sit here and come up with edge cases for every single feature for weeks and like iron out all the kinks, and then we put it out there and it doesn't even do well. The users don't like it. Yeah. So it's like that's where the business sense, I guess, comes in, is you have to understand the market and you have to understand how to leverage your customer base for feedback to guide you in the right direction.
Yeah. So actually, I do think Simon is a bit of a unicorn. And you kind of mentioned it, you said the business sense. And I know this, but you haven't mentioned it yet. At what point did you start doing your own companies? You ran at least one of your own companies.
Yeah, I've ran a few. So right after that job, my first job, I was there for 2 years, and I had worked. I was really fortunate enough to work with like Royal Caribbean and Caterpillar Machines and a few other brands.
You did Kia, right? Was that there, or that was different?
That was different. Kia? Yeah, that was different. So, but after that, the company was really starting to fail. In terms of the industry, like agencies, low-end agencies that work for small businesses kind of went to the wayside of Squarespace and Wix and these like
build your own.
Yeah, like Shopify's and all that. So they were going down, and we all saw it. It was pretty clear when they were missing paychecks and stuff. We had to take pay cuts and all that. Like, so me and we had two teams. We had the A team and the B team, and the A team was like top tier developers, our best guys and everything.
Which one were you on?
I was on the A team. Well, it depends on the day. But so the A team was like 5 of us, and we just decided like, I mean, we do this all day anyways. Let's just go start our own agency.
Cool.
So we did that. It was called Itty Bam, and it was a very like startup mentality. I mean, worked out of a Starbucks for like 2 months,
Awesome.
Yeah.
and we were just like trying to get customers and clients. We were white labeling for a few other companies and stuff. And that was where I had an opportunity to work with like Miley Cyrus and
Okay, cool.
a few other companies. But then,
Not directly, right? You didn't meet her, did you?
well,
meet
no,
her?
I worked with her manager.
Okay.
She, I don't know if I can talk about all the details.
Yeah,
but,
that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it was for a mobile app to go with her Bangers album release, and it was so stupid because it was like just a basic stickers app before there were iOS stickers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like emojis of like weed and like there was a weed leaf smoking a blunt, like a cartoon, like
No, they're not subtle.
yeah, very, very direct in their messaging. But Apple would not accept this app at all. And I remember we spent like 2 weeks on the phone with VPs of the review process or whatever, trying to get it approved. And her album ended up releasing, and I don't think they actually released with the app. So
Did it ever go out?
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
We got paid for it though. So.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right.
But yeah, so we started our own company, did that for about a year, but about 8 months in, we got approached by a guy who had this idea for a film festival website to compete with an Amazon subsidiary that was called Without a Box.
Okay.
And so it was like a great business idea where independent filmmakers submit their movies to film festivals. And it used to be this really complicated process where it was literally like 100 steps to get your film uploaded to this platform, and then you had to pay every single time you submitted it to one of the festivals. Like besides the fee that the festival is charging, the service will also charge you a fee for every one of those. And it was just an unbelievably clunky interface, and it was just crap all around. And they charged the festivals like 18% commission. So our business model was we were going to come in at 8.5% and no fees to the filmmakers at all. Like you could just upload your movie and you can click however many festivals you want at the same time instead of one by one on the other one, and just submit with no fees.
Oh, cool.
Beautiful. It's great. So we launched that, and then that was it basically became like an acqui-hire, where it was like we folded IddyBam into a different company, and then as a team we moved over to this new initiative called Film Freeway. And
so you've been a professional programmer designer for 2 years before you started this.
Correct. Yes. I had like 2.5 years experience at that point.
Like that. Yeah.
And
that's unique.
Yeah, it was a very unique situation, but I was working with some really great people.
Cool.
That like I'll always go back to. I would not be here if it wasn't for all the people I've worked with, and I feel very fortunate for that. But after that, there was a bit of a falling out, as is the case in most businesses. And then
Between your partners?
Yeah, just between like the culture and everything. And so I left and did my own thing for a little while. That's where I started Gravity. I went back to like the agency stuff, and I was just working with small businesses. I was trying to get like my own agency off the ground, but it was pretty difficult. I should have known that coming from 2 agencies before. But eventually I was just like, I'm really tired of having to take all the responsibility of a business, and like the marketing and the finance and the development and the design. And it's like I had contractors working with me, but it was just extremely stressful, especially coming out of like a fallout from a previous business. There was just a lot of stress and emotions going on. So that's when I decided I'm just going to go back to 9 to 5 and got the job at Flink. And
Here we go.
Here it goes.
Yep. And then I worked there, I feel like, for almost 2 years. Yeah.
Sounds about
right. I was just about to hit 2 years. And I guess a few times, like I got hired for design. And then a few times towards the end, it was like I was more of a product manager than anything else.
Who worked there first?
Me.
You did. Yeah,
you worked there first?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was literally like the first employee there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have this weird thing where I always get in at the very beginning.
That's
I don't
awesome.
know what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh,
I was
yeah,
there when they weren't issuing paychecks. That was
Oh, man.
fun. Yeah, the guy told it. I think I've said that. Maybe I've said this before on the podcast. I think I've told you this too. We were there for like 3 weeks, and we were like, okay, when like I get it. Maybe there's like a pay period thing, but like now we're at 3 weeks. Like when are we gonna get paid?
The math doesn't seem right.
The math just doesn't seem. And they were just like, oh, hold on. The pay period is 2 weeks, not a week. So you got to wait 2 weeks, do 2 weeks of work, and then you get
Oh
paid.
my God.
We're like, okay, all right, whatever. Like, I'm not going to get another job, so cool, we'll hang out. And then, like, on week 4.
Sounds like it's payday.
Yeah, when are we going to get paid? And the God love her, the what was her position? VP of, I guess I could say her name, Heather.
Yeah, I think we said her name
yeah.
before. Yeah.
She was like operations, I guess.
Yeah, VP of operations or whatever. She was awesome, but she was trying to like keep us all there, and she's like, "Okay, y'all just hang out like one more day. The owner's gonna come in. He wants to talk to you guys, whatever." And he comes in and he's like, "Oh, y'all are like on probation." And we're like,
I can't believe you didn't just quit.
What?
I can't believe you didn't just quit.
"Yeah."
Are you shitting me?
Yeah, and he was like, "I'm not gonna pay you until like we've solidified that you're gonna work here." And like,
No, I can't believe you didn't just quit.
Oh
That's
my
so
God.
shocking.
Now, yeah, it might.
I wouldn't do that.
It might seem shocking, but it's not because of him, obviously, that I stayed. I mean, he can testify. Like, Heather was awesome. I owe a
Yes.
whole lot to her.
But also, wasn't there a contract?
No,
the contract
I doubt
must-
it. I doubt it. I mean, I really
Well,
doubt
that's
it.
your fault.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
my fault. I was naive, though. Like, I
That's
don't know.
fair,
I just
yeah.
didn't know any better. And I don't know that I signed anything. I'm not even sure that I filled out, like, a W-4. I don't know if we did anything. Like, we just kind of came in and started working, and, like, the situation... Well, you got to think, like, it was really too good to be true for me at the time. And because it was like a situation where it was more money than I had made before, and
Well, it's easy to promise you a lot of money if you don't have to pay you.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And the deal was that we would work 4 days a week, but because I was working on the weekend, they would give us 1 day a week free pay, like just because we were willing to come in on the weekend. Like, I don't know why they offered that, but they did. They
Weird.
basically said, like, if you'll work Saturday and Sunday, we'll pay you for 5 days, but you only have to come in for 4. And it was good hourly rate anyways for me, so I was like, yeah, sure,
Yeah,
that sounds great. So I didn't want to leave because of that, because I was like, I think these guys are paying me more than I could probably make somewhere else right now.
disagree.
So,
Based
Yeah.
on the math,
Yeah.
you were getting paid 0.
yeah.
You
Anyways,
did eventually get a paycheck, though.
eventually we did get a paycheck.
Was it like back paid?
I believe it must have been. Like, I don't
Okay.
think there's any way we.
Yeah.
If I know him, it was back paid, but like still with like conditions on like the pay period was this.
The first
and that.
week actually didn't count.
Yeah.
but it's
Oh
back
my
paid
God.
before that.
And then I remember, I think you were there for this. I don't remember if this applied to you as much though as it did for those of us that had been there for a while. And there was never any resolution to this. They said that. So in the very beginning, I'm like totally derailing here, but it's a funny story.
No, you're good.
They so there was like those 2 weeks or whatever that we agreed that like this is the pay period. So we're
Yeah.
always 2 weeks behind, which is fine. We agreed to it, whatever. And yeah, he never ended up back paying us to the very beginning when he paid us. There was still that like 2 week buffer. Anyways, way later on when you guys came in, because they hired like a bunch of tech guys, and because I wasn't doing like programming at the time, I was doing
Okay.
more of like a managerial position. But anyways, they brought on these people, and you guys were the ones demanding that, like, you guys had a little bit more bargaining power, I think, and somebody made a fuss about the pay period thing, and they were like, I'm salary, you pay me for what I do. I work for 2 weeks, I get paid for 2 weeks. There's
Yeah.
no, like, whatever. So then Heather was trying to get it set up so that was how it would work. But then you owe us 2 weeks pay.
Yeah.
Because we have always been 2 weeks behind. No. We
never saw it?
Never received that back pay for 2
Oh
weeks,
my
and they
God.
just started, like... So, like... Effectively, our paycheck didn't change. Like, it didn't disrupt anything because we're still getting paid the same amount. But, like, you do owe me for 2 weeks if you're
Yeah.
going to come current on
Yeah,
that thing.
Yeah.
And we just never got that.
Oh, my
I mean, these are
God.
just, like, the horror stories of working for these people. But, like, what, am I going to quit because of that? Like, some people might, but, like, at the same time, I was learning a lot. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I was mad, and I made
That's
a
the
fuss about
balance.
it. But
That is the balance. Like, how much, like, even Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he says, he talks about rich and poor, but you could just say, like, he says, poor people work for money, rich people work to learn.
Yeah.
And, you can change those, like, adjectives or whatever, but it's like, I do think that it's a smart thing to focus on what you can learn at your job. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
because that's an investment. Maybe this job, and I always say this, maybe this job won't pay me what I think I deserve or whatever, what I think I'm worth, but the next job will.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have come in on weekends, depending on the jobs that I've done. you
Yeah,
know?
and the way that I saw it was like I had in the past, like I had done these little programming projects and stuff, but I mean, he knows I really wanted to start doing it like full time. Like I really wanted to get into it and stop just messing around with these small projects. And so the way that I saw it was like, yeah, I can leave. This is really frustrating, but I'd already been there for like maybe almost 2 years when you guys came in. I was there for like a long time,
Jeez,
like
yeah.
maybe 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
But anyways, I was like, if I can stick this out and then I can get my foot in doing full-time programming, that's what's going to go on my resume is 4 years of programming.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
it did pay it off.
And it did.
Like now,
It
like
did
looking
pay
back,
off. Yeah, it totally did. And it was good for me. And it exposed me also to technologies that I didn't think that I wanted to do. I was always wanting to do apps like that. Ever since the iPhone came out, that's what I was working on trying to get good at. And then you were the one pushing that I try to do the web stuff, even though that's not really what I wanted to do. But in hindsight, I'm super grateful and super happy that that's what happened because it exposed me to that world. And now I feel like I've got a really good picture of everything. Like I've got a good idea of how the back end stuff works, the web stuff works, the app stuff works. So I'm super grateful for that. But yeah, I mean, it ended up paying off, and I guess I'm glad that I did it. So
and we glossed over this. Excuse me, we glossed over this fact because you were running your own companies. But obviously, during this time, you did learn Vue. You learned programming like pretty well. I
Who?
keep playing with Simon.
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
I mean,
so,
he knew most of that stuff going in.
yeah, so
Probably
like
got better as.
it
I mean,
was-
like
you know,
over these 2 years, because
Well, yeah.
I had asked you before, like you said you had, like when you were doing that internship, you had pretty much just done like HTML and stuff
right.
like that.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, it was an iterative process where because I was sitting in a seat where you're expected to just do all kinds of things, like every day was an adventure. Every single day I did something that I had never touched before.
There?
I mean, at least for the first 2 or 3 years of my
It's
career.
never a dull moment in Simon's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually been like one of my life goals, I guess, is like every day I want to go to bed knowing more than I did when I woke up.
Yeah.
That was like, that's been
1% better or whatever
Yes.
like that. Yeah.
exactly. So you have to expose yourself to stuff you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I remember one time one of our servers got hacked and it was fine. Like somebody else took care of grabbing the backup, setting up a new server.
This was at Flink, right?
No,
because
this was at a
that
previous
happened
job.
at Flink too.
Yeah. But that I think somebody else took care of there. I didn't touch that one. But somebody took care of setting up a new server where we're going to migrate everything, but we need to clean the files first and all that. And nobody wanted to do it. And I was like, fine, I'll do it. And that's how I learned command line. Because it's like somebody just gave me a list of commands and what they do.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like copying and pasting, but I'm also like reading it and trying to understand how it works.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I'm going to just change this parameter when I'm doing this one and all like
Cool.
and you just start to figure it out. And that was how I got started with server management. And now it's like iterate over 5 years. And now it's like I can, run VMs and have like a whole home server set up.
Super
That's cool,
comfortable with it.
Yeah, it's like it's not an issue anymore. So that's really what it was at every single job, even at Flink, was like, well, they need somebody to do this on the website and it's in a language I've never used before. Okay, well, time to learn it.
Yeah.
When the web scene had developed into like progressive web apps, like I remember way back in the day, I had used PhoneGap to migrate a website into a mobile app. Did not work at all. It's terrible, but you learn a lot along the way. And it's the same thing like when Angular first came out, I jumped on that bandwagon. Like Angular, it was in beta or whatever, and I was using it.
Angular 1?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was fun to like learn a language as it's being developed. Same with like Swift UI now. I enjoy that because you can see how it evolves and I feel like you get a better understanding of it. But Angular 2 came out and they changed the language so drastically, I gave up to it and then switched to Vue. Because Vue was supposed to be like the trajectory of Angular 1 was now going in Vue's direction and Angular 2 was going off in a different one. And now Vue has done the same thing and changed their structure completely.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, now I'm switching to React and trying to learn that. Right. But it's the same boat all over the
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
But that's how I learn, is just like, it's more out of necessity for the job than it is out of like, oh, I really like this technology.
Yeah.
You know,
Cool.
there's something that Steve Jobs once said that I really love, where he was like, you know, you start with the customer experience and move yourself back to the technology. You don't start with the technology and then come up with
I remember that
a
in the
customer
keynote
experience.
in like the 80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I take that approach with basically everything, but in the sense of learning languages, it's not the customer experience, it's the business sense. It's the business side of things. It's like, how can I leverage the technology? Or, well, it's more, what's the business problem I'm trying to solve? And then how can I get a technology that solves that problem?
I say this all the time. Like, programming is a tool to solve these problems, but as an engineer, the goal is to just solve the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever that involves.
So it's better if you know more tools, whether
Yeah.
it is like
and design.
Yeah, and design. If you know like Bash scripting, like maybe not writing everything in Swift or in PHP or whatever, like, but like if you know all these tools, you know how to approach a problem, and it could be vastly different actually.
Yeah. And the phrase like there's a million ways to skin a cat
Yeah.
is so true when it comes to programming.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the same person can solve the same problem 20 different ways. Just depends how he woke up that morning, you know?
Except the guy we used to work for, or used to work with, would argue that Swift can solve all problems.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Every single problem.
Oh, we could send a rocket to the moon.
You
Oh,
can
yeah.
do
You know?
server side now.
That's actually your quote, which
yeah.
I like. No, you can't.
Yeah.
You don't pin that on him. That's you. But I actually
That's
like
true.
that quote. I repeated that so many times. I remember you saying that, which is something along the lines of like, if you ask us to fly a rocket to the moon with JavaScript, we'll do it.
Yeah, like if you have the money and the time,
Yeah.
you could do it.
We could do it.
Yep.
And they kind of did. I mean, like they sent the SpaceX rocket. Like, did you know that? Like all of their panels and stuff were written in JavaScript.
Oh, like the at the command center or whatever, right?
No,
Or
on the rocket.
On the rocket? Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The what's no
Electron?
Electron? No. Is it no?
What?
What are you looking for?
The Chromium.
Oh, okay.
It was written in like Chromium and JavaScript.
Okay.
All of the panels that the astronauts were working off of. So I just thought that was cool because that was kind of like it brought your statement 5 years or 4 years ago like full circle. Like, yeah, they did fly a rocket to the moon with JavaScript.
That's hilarious.
Single-threaded.
Yeah.
So he didn't get there fast.
Yeah, did get there fast. One thing that I kind of want to talk about, I was going to say it earlier, but I kind of liked where we were going. But you had mentioned, like, you had worked for your own little developer studio, whatever, doing this stuff. And then you'd mentioned Foursquare coming out and
Shopify.
Shopify and Wix and all that. So one thing we talked about on a previous episode that I kind of would like to get your opinion on is, like, how much do you think that hurts or devalues the engineering industry? Or does it at all?
I don't think it does hurt. Well, okay. It affects it. I don't know if I would say it hurts it. It affects it in the sense that it raises the bar for a junior developer.
Okay.
Right?
That's
Because now
a good point.
it's like now just because you can build a simple web page doesn't really mean anything because there's not much of a need. I mean, okay. I feel like I said that wrong. There is a need for junior developers, okay?
Yeah.
Especially people that don't have experience. But in terms of the market, there was a need for somebody that could just go into small businesses and help them out.
Yeah.
That need is no longer there. So it took a chunk of the junior developer scene and threw it to the corporations and the larger companies, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really know what that atmosphere looks like. Like, I don't know the job numbers, but I imagine it just took a lot, like it raised the bar. It raised the barrier of entry,
yeah.
for junior developers.
That's a good point, actually, because even look at our current company. One of the websites was WordPress. Right? It was running on WordPress for a long time. And then as they got bigger, as we're getting bigger, we realized we need our own system.
Yes.
But then look who built it. Like, the person who built it is not a junior developer.
Right.
Like, he's really good. And so, I mean, we have some junior developers, not on the mobile app side, but like we hire some juniors.
Right, but then even the juniors have like
they're good.
Experience.
I mean,
like
The expectations of junior developers are kind of ridiculous.
a lot of times I laugh. I think I sent you one. I get all these like emails, whatever, from like LinkedIn or Glassdoor or whatever, and so I'll look through the resumes of junior developers, and it will just be like 2 years like 2 years experience, like knowledge of like MySQL, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, TypeScript, like, maybe React or whatever. It's like, what? Like,
Just take junior out of your resume.
Yeah, that's it.
Apply
Because
for the dang job.
yeah, because if you're, and we've talked about this, like the barrier of entry is difficult. Even just like if you want to start up, like if you want to start up like a React project or like a Laravel project, like you can do, like you do need to know like a ton of command line. And they give you a whole bunch of stuff if you imagine what Laravel gives you right out of the box. But also you need to know a ton just to be able to, do you have PHP installed on your machine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it the right version of PHP?
Yeah, is it the right version? Is it like, like, and then I guess deploying it, if you use the correct tools, deploying it isn't actually that difficult. You don't have to know all of the
I wouldn't say that's
No,
trivial
yeah,
either, though.
Yeah. Like there's
Like if you
I
use
forget the
Envoyer or something like
Well,
that.
but even if you use Envoyer, like as a junior developer, you have to know what Envoyer's purpose is.
Yeah.
What is it even doing?
I need your SSH like public key.
Yeah.
What?
Well, but even beyond that, it's like if somebody says, "Oh, you want to deploy an app, use something like Forge or Envoyer."
Yeah.
Well, still, you're like,
Yeah.
What does that mean? I get that
Yeah.
it deploys it to a website, but what is involved in that? What does that even mean? What if it fails? How do I deal with that? Like,
That's a good point.
or just like I mean, you could tell a junior developer this tool would solve this. Like I remember at one point somebody was telling me about a FTP program to use or whatever, SFTP program, and I'm like, I don't even really know what SFTP means. Like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing with this. And like, well, you can use it to transfer files. Yeah, but what does that mean? What am I doing? With, why do I need this? Like, I get, it would be nice to be able to have file access, but why? And how does that work? And so even if you know the tool, it doesn't mean that you understand why you use that tool or what problem it's exactly solving.
Yeah.
I
mean, there's a sense, I forget what the term is, but there's like this baseline level of domain knowledge that's expected of everybody that works in an industry. Right? And in programming, every year that goes up and up and up.
Yeah. So the interesting thing, I guess this kind of goes to your question. The interesting thing is it's easier now for anybody to start a web page.
Right.
Wix, WordPress, whatever. But yeah, you're right. The barrier of getting into being a programmer, and we've talked about this on the iOS side as well. Download Xcode. Okay, then what?
Yeah.
Because you do need to know so much about a programming language. I mean, that's why at the very least you have to watch some tutorials, and they're not necessarily going to explain everything. I mean, they shouldn't explain everything like just a big knowledge dump. You can't do that.
That's why we talked on a previous episode, and I just kind of laugh when people think that like AI is going to take away programming jobs, and I'm like, no, humans will just find a way to make it harder. Like that's really what we do. We're just going to want more.
We'll just push the limits.
We're just going to keep pushing what we can do. So, I mean, we already do it. Like that. This is kind of the same idea. Like I get that Shopify is not AI, but in essence, it's fighting us the same way that AI would, which is that it's making it easier to solve these basic tasks, but we just find a way to make websites more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it is exactly like what happens in game programming, right? Like, we have Xbox One now, or whatever, PlayStation 5, and that could, like, with no slowdown whatever, or whatsoever, you could run, like, the 10 years old Batman game. Right? Or what, I mean... I'm playing Batman right now. So that's or like the 20-year-old Star Wars Starfighter. The new Star Wars Squadrons just came out, and now it's like multiplayer, and like the graphics are just insane because it's like, okay, yeah, we built this tool. Yeah, we could run the old thing better, but let's push it, right? We want more. We want a better experience. We want multiplayer or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
This is why I'm really fascinated with the games industry, because in game development, like, you are constantly pushing boundaries.
Oh, yeah.
Like with what we're doing, like on iOS or Android apps or even web apps, you're not pushing any hardware boundaries. You're not really. I mean, I guess you could, but in general, you're not. But in the game industry, they're always having to come up with better systems, better engines, the game industry fascinates me. And you've got like one guy that his job is like lighting or something. And like he focuses on just one part of the lighting. I don't know. I just think the game stuff is super, super cool. I think it's awesome that you've gotten exposed to that, because you can tell when talking to you, when making an app, that your brain is on a different level. Like the way that you're thinking is different than me. I'm not really thinking about like, and this is something that I should get better at, but I'm not thinking about hyper efficiency the way that you are. Like you're always like thinking,
but again, I always think it's good to have these different perspectives, because you definitely think about things different than I do.
I have more of the brain of like, and I think you do too. I mean, you probably also would be. You're probably a mix between the two of us. But for me, it's always like, to a fault, I'm weighing the pros and cons, and usually the pro of the approach that I take is quickest to deploy,
Yeah.
and it's going to make us money really quickly.
Yeah.
And that's been really successful for me so far, like, because I've just been able to get these features out that can make money and they work really well. And I'm not writing crappy software. Our crash rates speak for themselves, bug reports speak for themselves, but it's not like, when you look at your code, it's like just hyper efficient, like crazy scalable, whatever. Sometimes it's
maybe over engineered.
Sometimes it is, but and that's the thing, and that's
There's a balance. There's a balance somewhere to be had.
the
Always.
con of the approach that you take, and there's a lot of engineers that would rather be more like you, because the con of the way that you write code is just time. It's just that this is going to. I mean, you can have it fast, you can have it cheaper, you can have it
good
On time. Oh,
yeah. And you're sacrificing fast. But there's a ton of developers. Sean was just
Sean. He said when we were talking about some hypothetical company, he was just like, "Well, I just wouldn't work there."
Like fast if you couldn't is not in my dictionary.
If you couldn't write unit tests, I just wouldn't work there.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's always going to be good.
Yeah.
Hey, that's fair.
That's fair. Yeah.
And he probably would put all of his eggs in that corner. I don't really want it fast or cheap, just good.
Yeah.
And I'm going to focus as much as I can on that pillar. And so, but that's to your style. Like, not being as focused on speed doesn't take away from your engineering ability, but I feel like for me it kind of does, like, because you might say like, well, Cole's got a good business mind potentially, like, because he can get things out quickly and start making money fast, but like, me sacrificing good code is not a good testament to my engineering ability. Does that make sense? Like, you want to be a good engineer.
I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that, because there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in the games industry, efficiency and like throughput and whatever,
that's a
like
requirement
that's
in the games industry.
Right.
So.
Like, you can't get around that.
Yeah.
But if you're developing like a mobile app for, I don't know, even just Amazon, right? It's like, besides the bandwidth performance, like the web performance itself, it doesn't really matter. Like, the point is just to get the thing on the page or to get the project deployed, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And if you have, like, you know, I have a friend, and you've worked with him as well, where it's impossible for him not to approach it as the best possible engineering solution. Any problem. Like, you could tell him, dude, we need this feature as soon as possible. Like, we found a way to make $1 million if we finish this feature by Friday.
Yeah.
Okay. He still cannot do anything other than just focus on the best engineering solution possible. And it just never fits within the timeline.
Yeah.
Right. And that's fine for some places, but then sometimes we just need the $1 million. Not even though we need it, but like, that's the goal. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there is a balance, and I think that we're both good at this. You are better at it, but like if somebody says, I need this out by Friday, we can come up with solutions to get out by Friday. But you're right, there is a time and a place. Places like Google or even Amazon or whatever, now, because they are at such scale, they probably do want people that is exactly like that. We can't let this out. But the fact is, Amazon and Google wasn't like that. They weren't. They weren't like that at the start.
Yeah.
You think Jeff Bezos was like sitting in that little office in Seattle? Like, you think he was just like, well, how can I plan this, to serve, the 7 or 8 billion people on planet Earth?
Yeah, I got to get this request down to under a second on 3G. Okay?
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah, and because, I mean, that's a good point, because at scale, like, when you start talking about billions of people using an application or hundreds of millions, like, when you have a 0.01% problem, that's a massive problem versus when you're dealing with a smaller one. We were talking to a guy that did he did an interview at Facebook, and one thing that they were telling him was that whenever you're searching for something, obviously you want to wait until maybe the user pauses to send off a request to get the data back, right? And so one of their expectations was that you store that in like a dictionary so that it's cached, even if so if you start typing, you make a request, you type some more, but then you backspace, like you don't want to make a
Yeah,
request.
you're not
again.
making an additional request.
You're not
Okay.
making additional requests, and that's like the hyper efficiency. That's like not. We would never do something like that right now because it just wouldn't be worth the engineering time. Like it's
Right.
like we can make more money. That would take us, who knows, 3 or 4 hours. I don't know if it would take that long, but to do something like that versus we can spend that 3 or 4 hours getting something that we know is a needle mover right now, like lower hanging fruit.
Well, and in a big company like that, where it's like they're already going to be dedicating a lot of resources to quality assurance and documentation, and it's like it doesn't hurt to just spend a little bit extra time. On the engineering side, because in the scope of things, in like the larger picture, it's not that big of a cost. Right. But at a small company, all of those things come.
All of those things.
Well, and that's for a company like Facebook. Every time that the user, even milliseconds that they're spending waiting for a search result is a millisecond they're not looking at an ad, which is making Facebook money. And at that type of scale, I mean, you probably are over the course of a year talking about hundreds of millions of dollars potentially that just caching a response could save.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had a teacher when I was in school. I had a teacher who, I think he was just a part-time teacher, but worked at Google, and he was saying hash tables, like dictionaries. He's like, if they ever ask you a question, the answer is always hash tables because Google just cares about speed so much. So, and I guess maybe all of these companies are like that, right? At some level. I didn't really understand it at the time, but even now, as we're talking about this, that makes sense.
Yeah, Google, that is an impressive software company. Oh my God, I don't know if I agree with what they're doing, but just how quick everything works and how integrated it is and how much, like, imagine being that company that is your company knows more about people than any other company on the whole planet, and like y'all know a lot. Y'all know a heck of a lot. That's why, like, we talk about Apple a lot on here, and Apple just irritates the crap out of me sometimes, but I will say that it just really does feel like they have the consumer at heart. Like, they really, in terms of like privacy, like, there's people that are going to be doubters and they're going to say maybe Apple's just as crooked as Google and they're collecting all this data. But the reality is the FBI has gone to Apple for data and Apple was like, no, not happening. I respect that about them. I just can't. Obviously, Google's not like that. But Google is just so involved in everybody's lives. It's just a crazy piece of software. Amaya was asking me the other day how Google works. And I was like, oh, boy. There's a lot going on there. Like, it's so crazy how... who was I listening to? Neil deGrasse Tyson was talking about how like Google is like the epitome of like confirmation bias or whatever, and like they're able to deliver results to you everywhere, not even just through the search engine, but just everywhere based on what they know about you. It's crazy software. Those guys that's next level. But anyways, okay, so we're kind of getting towards the end here. So let's make the connection for you from Flink to where you're at now. Like what did that look like?
Working at Flink is mainly a UI UX position, but towards the tail end, like I said, it was more of like product management. But me and Dan did not get along there at the end.
Dan didn't get along with anybody.
Yeah. So I just bailed that ship or jumped ship from that. And I was really fortunate enough to get another job here locally, at a place called Structure Studios, where they design software for building pools and stuff, like for pool builders and landscape artists and stuff like that.
And Henderson?
Yeah, they work out of the Caterpillar Cashman building on St. Rose.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful office, and it's a really great group of people. Like, it's a cool company and everything. It's just way too slow paced for me. They're not a web focused company. They're a software focused company, and I wasn't working on the software. So basically everything that I did was like low on the priority. And like, I remember I finished a page and it took like over 2 months for it to get approved by the owner and stuff. And it's just like, hey, if I was just there for a paycheck, it's a pretty chill job. And the culture was cool. They would do like catered lunch every Friday. And we'd have like big birthday parties for everybody, and there was an office dog, and everybody there played video games and loved video games, and there were people there from like Telltale Games and Rockstar.
Oh, cool.
It was just like a really cool place to be. But man, the work after a year of being there, almost a year, it just really ate at me, and I was like, all right. And then I contacted you. Actually, you had contacted me a few times. Oh, like, I remember right when I took that job, you had texted me about the one now, and
I
think I texted you 3 or 4 times about
Yes.
it, and you were just like, nope, nope, nope. I was like,
Yeah.
man.
It was hard to leave that place, but after it frustrated me, I just left. And then when we talked that weekend and you sold me on this one,
Yeah.
I was pretty stoked.
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like, all right, let's get back into this like fast paced, wearing multiple hats, always something to do.
Yeah.
That's what I love, man. But yeah, so anyways, took that and that's where
And
I'm
you
at
have
today.
and you have done a lot here, right? Because I think I guess I don't know what your original title was, but were you working on any of you were working on the original WordPress site as they were doing the transition?
No,
I don't think so.
Yeah,
No,
no.
okay.
When I got hired, it was for design.
Okay.
But a common theme at this company, I guess, is that you don't always work on what you got hired for. So the first 3 months, I was working with Dennis on sales funnels, the sales funnel engine.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, in Laravel. So it was like back-end programming, and I remember telling him like, dude, I do not like I haven't programmed PHP in like 6 years, dude. I don't know what's going on. So, but they gave us all the resources. We had the Laracasts
Laracast,
and everything,
yeah,
and
I really like that.
you know, just went home, watched a bunch of those, and
And that was
over,
cool,
like,
right?
2
Because
weeks.
you didn't really work with Laravel much, if at all, before, right?
No, I mean I didn't know what a resource was or any of that
Yeah.
stuff. Like,
Now that's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
yeah, and it's fun. Like
It's
now I
fun,
can
yeah.
pull stuff off, and
And we
Yeah.
took the same opportunity too when I realized that there was work to be done that was holding us up on the Laravel side. Laravel was not something that I was comfortable with, and like now I'm like, yeah, I could totally get involved with something on that side.
Yeah.
Totally comfortable with it now.
Yeah.
Not senior by any means, but like definitely capable of having a conversation
Yeah.
about
If
it.
you need me, or like we could do our own stuff. Like if
We
you,
and we do for the mobile app. A
Yeah.
lot of the API stuff is just built by us at this point.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
telling you over the last year, like since March, since the Corona stuff happened, like we've been doing almost all of our own back end.
Yeah.
There was one thing. The only thing that wasn't was like a subscription based thing because it had to do with payments. I didn't want to touch it, so we had VP of engineering do it. But
Yeah, and if anybody uses the app and they find a bug, that wasn't us. That was the other guys. We do the bug free code.
I don't
Yes.
write bugs, so
Yeah,
it couldn't
yeah,
have been
of course.
mine.
Couldn't have been us.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a cool story, man. Like I think the designer developer duo kind of thing is
Entrepreneur.
so freaking cool. Yeah, because I always say, man, if I had the skills that you have, I'd be a millionaire. Like like it's just crazy to me because I'm with Matt. I like the design part a little bit more, but you've said you don't even really enjoy that part at all. You really just like the architectural kind
Yeah,
of.
I mean, I definitely I feel good about my skills in that area, and I just since I've never focused on the design, I don't know. I wouldn't know what to do. So it's like I can see when I write bad code or whatever. It's like, oh, this could be better, even if I don't know the solution.
Yeah.
When I do anything related to design, I'm so much a beginner. It's like actually even on this podcast, he had a good eye for it. He was like, it just doesn't look good. And I asked him, I go, which part? I
Yeah,
go, what? Explain to me what you're not seeing. Actually, my wife is an artist, and she said the same thing. We were talking about now I forget what, maybe some of her paintings or whatever, and I said, or maybe it was like her website or something, and I go, you start telling me why these things aren't good, and I can internalize it. I can learn that, but like right now, I just don't have, like I have no reference, no framework for like how to evaluate if something is good or bad or like in the
Yeah.
design realm or whatever. So
yeah, it's a huge problem because like, let's see, it's like when you go to a store and you're like picking out T-shirts or something. It's like you can look at a T-shirt and you can say, oh, that's a cool design, or you can look at it and go, I really don't like that. But why is a really hard problem or
A
a really
little
hard
bit,
question
yeah.
to solve.
Yeah,
do you
Right.
see the shirt that I'm wearing right now? I got this for free for doing a 5K. So,
Hey.
you know.
I
Well,
like
you
it.
know,
I just
priorities.
feel so defeated about it because something tells me that like you have to be that type of brain. Like you just have to be born like that, and I'm just not.
I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, see,
I don't know if
I
that's
don't
true.
believe that. Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, but like I have this defeated attitude because I love it, but like anytime I try to get involved in it, it's just not it. I just can't get it right.
The way that because I faced that a lot where I'd be like, especially when I did my own video game blog when I was really young, it was like, crap, like how do I make this thing look good? And what the thing that I did that really helped me was I went to like CNN.com and like New York Times and just the bigger websites.
Trying to figure out why they are good.
Well, no, what I did was
Something
I literally like took a screenshot of their website, put it into Photoshop, and started recreating all the elements. And
Oh,
I was thinking like, eventually it's going to click. Eventually, I'm
Yeah.
going to be creating these and realize now I see why these things are put in there. And it did happen. I just had to do it like 10 times.
Yeah.
Different websites,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
IGN. You know, I remember didn't redesign. I designed the exact same thing
Okay.
in Photoshop. And that's just kind of how you learn, like, okay,
Yeah.
well, this is how they design that element.
When
So
when
I
I
did
was
that, like-
when I was like in that band, like when I was learning instruments, because I think learning instruments, learning an instrument and being in a band is a good like example of how to learn anything, because you can start out by writing your own songs, but really a lot of the things that you do is you learn other people's songs, and that's part of the fun as well, right?
Yeah.
You learn other people's songs, and maybe you're not that focused on it, but like then you start diving deep. Okay, well, why did they choose these chords or whatever, right? What is this? And then, so that's what I would do. I learned some of my favorite band songs, and then I would write songs that were very much like those songs, right? And then, I mean, then I stopped, but that's a different story. but I think that's how you learn.
Yeah,
anything.
absolutely. Yeah.
I like the data side of the UX stuff. I think UX makes a little bit more sense to me than UI. The UI stuff I just can't get right. I mean, we've all here seen the design that I made for the first version of the app that we work on now. Ooh. But I like the UX side because it can be data driven. You can make decisions about user experience based on data. And we had the girl that was before you here. She's not here anymore, and there were some problems with her because she wasn't really willing to make any decision that wasn't data driven. But one thing that she said that I did like is that the user experience should be based on customer feedback and data, and like what is working, what's not, what's converting, what's not, and making decisions on that. And I like that. And this company has given me a pretty good appreciation for that, because this company, although we're not maybe super focused on hyper programming efficiency, we are focused on hyper efficient interfaces that obviously, and every business should be. So that part of it I really like, and that part of it I'm trying to learn more and more about. But as far as like when I can say like, hey dude, I need this button that does this thing, and you could just whip it up and it just looks great and it like works well right out of the box, I just can't do that. Like the sales button we come up, like there's no way I could have come up with something like that. Like that's just so crazy to me.
Yeah, but also I think it's like it is give and take, because we were mentioning this before, some of the other people that we've worked with at either this company or other companies, I don't know if they could have done that button. So it's like there's like, it must be cool, not to like toot our own horn so much, but like you do come up with really cool designs like that angle block. And then we made it so that it could be like programmatically, you could like change those values or whatever. It's like that's cool.
Well, and another thing I just thought of too is it's probably a really good idea to separate the design role from the programming role, because there's corners that we would cut because we would know how difficult maybe that button would be to implement, and so we'd come up with something easier. But when you give it to us, we're excited about it because I didn't come up with that, and as far as I'm concerned, you're the designer, so that's my job. That's what I'm making, and there's no corners to cut. There's no way, like, that's what we're building. Yeah. But I wouldn't have come up with that. Not only because I just don't think that I'm that creative, but also because I wouldn't have probably wanted to have spent that much time on a button if it was my decision to design. But I'm really happy that we did, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that, in hindsight, I'm glad we spent the time, but I wouldn't have thought that that was a worthy investment myself.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It wasn't until I saw the end product that I'm like, that was worth it.
But there is still, there is obviously give and take. A perfect example is the credit card form, the address form within that button. That that exists on iOS but not on Android, because I couldn't do that. I couldn't do those animations and properly like avoid the keyboard.
Right.
Or
so,
at least we didn't have the time to really dive into it.
I mean, I didn't think that it would have been,
well, and in that case, and in the case across the board with a lot of this stuff, it starts with the user experience, but we can't, like, flip the technology upside down just because of that. And I understand that. Like, that's a business case, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, like, the main primary component of things that I design is like just the user experience. If you guys decide, oh, well, putting this image here is really more challenging than putting it over here, that's not a problem as long as it doesn't interrupt the user experience, right? And I mean, there's a lot of like testing you can do that says like, no, this button on the left is actually converting way better than the button on the right, or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, especially for V1 implementations, it's just about like the primary user experience. And if we need to make concessions like on the credit card form, it's like, okay, does that really break the user experience? Not particularly. Not enough to warrant, another 20 hours of development.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
And that's always a case-by-case basis. Maybe we do have the time. And
Yeah,
it's like, hey, make it as perfect
Let's
as you can.
let's make this cooler.
Yeah.
Cool. That sounds good.
Yeah, and that button was a good example of what you said Steve Jobs said, which is like you approach the user experience and then work backwards. Like, what is the best, most clean form for them to give us their information, and then let's work backwards to the engineering, and let's figure out how to make it happen then. And if we got to approach it back up a little bit when we get to the engineering side, fine, but we're going to focus with the best experience and then work backwards. So But hey, look, we're getting towards the end here. I know that we kind of set a time limit on this. The last thing that we always do at the end of the podcast is just, what is your advice to the junior dev out there? He's kind of confused. He or she's kind of confused. They don't know where they want to go from here. They're interested in programming. Like, what is the most profound piece of advice you can give them to really accelerate their engineering career?
From a programming perspective, it would be like two things. Number one, surrounding yourself with a community of good developers is really, really important. Like I think
we do have a Discord channel.
Hey, join them on Discord. But yeah, having resources where you can just ask questions and get feedback is huge. And you need to be surrounded by people that you can trust to give you good feedback, and don't take any of it personally, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a big one. The second thing I would say is just when you're getting overwhelmed, break it down, right? It's like, you don't have to go out there and learn React.js. What you have to do is learn, well, how do I get a project set up?
Yeah.
And then from there, okay, how do I get my home screen going? And then how do I get a form working? And if that home page is too complicated, then you say, well, how do I get a picture up here? How do I change the colors? Like, just break it down and keep breaking it down until you have a bite-sized chunk of work that you can actually accomplish. Yeah. And if you do enough of those, it's like, there's this quote from Will Smith where he says, when he goes out to build a wall, he doesn't go out to build a wall. He goes out to lay one brick as perfectly and amazingly as he can. And then he's going to do that again and again and again and again. Cool. And then you have a wall.
Yeah. To add to your point, I would say make sure that if you can't get that brick right, you don't move on until it is right. And I know that in the moment, that kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, which is it can be infuriating in the moment, and you're like, this doesn't offer any value. I just can't get this thing right, and I'm not learning how to do this the right way. But it's like, really learn it the wrong way. Once you have that bite-sized chunk, don't move on until you finish it. And I think that's something that I learned from you, I would say, is getting things down to those bite-sized chunks, being comfortable with just saying, like, I'm not going to move on until I get this figured out. Yeah. And I'll keep going one step down until it's one line of code that I'm focusing on until I get that right, and then I'm going to move on. Yeah. And that was really helpful for me. And I think that's what's made me super comfortable with discomfort, is like, I don't worry about what I don't know anymore, because I know that one of my best skills is being able to break down problems into something that I can manage. Not how do I set up a web server, but how do I even log into a web server?
Yeah, exactly.
That's my first step. Let me get there. Or what service can I use to set this thing up? So that's a really good piece of advice. I think that's it. That's episode 19.
Cool. 19,
we appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah,
you offer a really unique perspective.
Like,
Super, super cool. If anybody out there can be a unicorn like this guy, do design and development, and the engineers you work with will absolutely love you because you've got a skill they don't have.
Do you have any advice for people who want to get into design?
Yeah, let's cover that real quick.
Into design, it would be the one thing that kept me going, because I guess my biggest challenge has been, it's really easy to look at other designers out there and go, wow, this guy is ridiculously good. And I don't know if I could compete with this, But if you have an eye for design, like, you can look at something and tell this is good design or this is bad design. You can't necessarily say why.
Yeah.
But you know deep down something's off.
Yeah.
Okay. And that feeling tells you that you have some kind of knowledge somewhere in there of what, like, you understand something. And if you just keep chasing that and trying to understand that, it'll take you really, really far.
Yeah.
Because that's really like the motivation is like when you look at your own design and you're like, man, this just didn't come out.
It
Like,
just doesn't compare.
gosh, I started this and I had this vision that it was going to be really badass, and now like the fonts don't really work and the colors aren't quite there and it looks dull or whatever. It's like that should be telling you that you still got it.
Yeah.
You still got it in you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've just got to keep
You need
pushing.
to gain the skills. They
Right.
mentioned that in So Good They Can't Ignore You. I think it was like Ira Glass had mentioned something like that. He was talking about editing for like radio, but he was saying like what is good and your skills just aren't there, but at least you have that. He called it taste. You have the taste because you know that the thing that you've done isn't it.
Yeah.
And chase that. Like,
Exactly.
So you just have to spend time putting in the skills.
It's frustrating because I'm in the middle of this right now with the podcast. Every single time it's getting better, but like every time I look at it, I'm like, it's just there's something. I know like the cinematic sort of look that we're going for. I know the sound we're going for, and we're getting there. But like, there's just pieces that I don't understand, and I've learned so much about cameras and recording and audio, and we've gone through so much equipment at this point trying to just get to the right thing. That I have a much better understanding of all this now, and I'm also learning about all the camera stuff too, ISO and all this other stuff, color balance and white balance, and trying to figure all that out. So I'm in the middle of it right now. I don't know. We'll see where it gets, but I don't know. Like it is frustrating, but I know that I'll know when it's right.
Yeah.
I know that it's not there, but I know I'll know when it's right.
Yep.
So.
And you just keep playing with things and you'll learn how to leverage like your camera settings and your audio setup. And then when you get it right, feels amazing.
Yeah. It feels really good, especially where we're at now, considering the first episode. You just look at the first episode to now and you're just like, it's night and day. And it's progressively getting better every single time. So anyways, awesome. Great advice. Again, appreciate you coming on. That's episode 19. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, join the Discord, Twitter, whatever.
Ask us questions. If you have questions,
if you have a design question, we'll forward it along.
That's right.
Hey, I'll join the Discord.
Yeah. There you go. Sick. Cool. Thanks, everybody, for watching episode 19, and we will see y'all next week.